Hello everyone, I'm Mark Oliver. I'm your organiser and for dev.talk. I'm your host tonight as well, so if you've got any issues, come see me or anybody with a lanyard. We'll try and help. It's great to see you all here. It's good to see our communities growing. This is our third event now, and we've got loads of speakers lined up for the rest of the year already, as soon as I can tie down a venue for them. So let's get into it. So we've got two amazing speakers tonight. The first one is Andy Ross, who's sat right here. Hi, Andy, who's the head of talent. And he's going to take us through 3 years of change, decoding the new maze. I assume there's an exit out of the maze, right?
I'd have to ask the AI again with the title.
So what is it? I'll try again later. Is that the answer it'll give you? Yeah.
Pretty much.
And then we have Claudia, who's all the way from London to join us here tonight, who's sat at the back. Hi, Claudia. Who's going to take us through, she's lead ML engineer. I'm hiding her picture. She's going to take us through Beyond Automation, how Agentic AI is reshaping the future, which sounds really cool. I don't know what most of those words mean, but I'd be interested to find out. So that's it. So Andy's going to start us off and we're going to get going immediately.
Yeah, so my name's Andy. I've worked mostly independently as a recruiter for about 13 years. I spent a lot of that time hiring for tech startup founders in London. It was a big boom time, as I'm going to talk about shortly, for venture capital investment in anything and everything that could be turned into a tech product over the last few years. And I found myself doing hiring in quite a lot of different product areas and different industries. So the more kind of technically interesting end would be probably AI, or pretend AI at that time, in biotech. But I did a lot of hiring for the founders of finance platforms and streaming services and finance companies and e-commerce places and all sorts. I was quite lucky. So 3 of the founders that I was retained by to hire there.
Thanks, Mark.
You are now 90.
Yeah. So three of the founders that I was retained by to hire the founding engineering teams for. We went from seed stage startups, so 5 or 6 of us in a room, right through to multi-billion valuation companies. And 8 of the teams had successful exits. So they sold their smaller tech products to bigger tech companies in the most part, but a couple actually floated in their own right, which was really cool. I didn't get rich, unfortunately. I was just helping to hire people and organize teams, but it was, yeah. I spent most of the last 5 years working in the video games industry. So in 2020, I started a video games headhunting firm called Studio Vision. That grew to a team of 12. We were doing a very different type of hiring there. So it was across the whole spectrum of video game development, from low-level engine and simulation programming, right through to UI and production and design. And we were doing this for very large, famous companies in the games industry. So big corporations, but they prefer to be known as AAA studios. So I built teams for Rockstar Games, Sony PlayStation Studios, Microsoft, EA, Epic Games, both the Unreal Engine team and Fortnite, which was quite successful. Larian Studios, who had a big hit with Baldur's Gate 3. Hello Games, who did No Man's Sky. I don't know if we've got any gamers in here. Yeah, so that's been quite interesting over the last 5 years or so. Sorry, if you can see my very waffly presentation. Cool, we've done an introduction to me. Yeah, so my presentation is I'm going to be talking about the journey that the UK tech industry's been on since the 2008 recession, and how compensation, hiring decisions, interview processes, and employment opportunities have shifted during this time. So does anybody know why I would be starting with the 2008 recession? I'm looking for people who might have experienced this.
We all got laid off.
Yeah. So the recession in 2008, obviously, yeah, lots of people got laid off. It was quite a horrendous time, especially if you were working in financial services or anything related to that industry at the time. But the recession itself actually led to a surge in entrepreneurship. And at this time, this included many tech-focused ventures. The recession also accelerated the trend towards digital transformation, as it was termed, as businesses sought ways to cut costs and improve efficiency. And this created a much bigger demand for tech solutions. Yeah, so and this is when I sort of began my career in tech. So everybody was talking about digital transformation at the time. I was 20 years old then. I was fascinated by technology, determined to get myself a fancy office job in London so that I could make my fortune. But unfortunately, I couldn't afford to put myself through university at the time, which meant my working options were limited somewhat. Fortunately for me, the recruitment industry was extremely welcoming and the barrier to entry was quite low. You needed a positive attitude, a thick skin, and a desire to learn, and I had those attributes in abundance. So I joined a recruitment company who specialized in digital transformation. And at this time, early movers in the enterprise world were beginning to leverage digital technologies to fundamentally change processes, customer experiences, and overall business models. And this meant IT teams, as we called them at the time, were shifting from cost centers to value drivers. Salaries began to rise, suits and ties started disappearing, and the work itself was becoming really fun. This wasn't keep the old system running as long as you can, no matter what. This was building from scratch with brand new technologies. I made just over 150 hires for enterprise-level companies over the next 3 years, helping software engineers move away from employers who chose not to or were unable to innovate, most of whom ultimately went out of business. So in sorry, a bit warm up here, Mark. Whew. In 2014, I left employment to begin working independently. And this coincided with the UK's startup boom. So US venture capital money started flowing into the UK, well, London in the most part. We were sort of like Silicon Valley's satellite office, and we even had our own aptly named Silicon Roundabout in Old Street. Investment was pouring into new companies, and investors were not considering the usual business data like revenue, profit, loss. Followers and subscribers were the new metrics required to raise millions of pounds in speculative investment, and huge numbers of jobs were created by new startups looking to build products, many of whom were still in search of problems to solve. Those who did find product market fit, and those who were funded with a monopolization strategy from the get-go, began to influence employee expectations around what an employer is expected to provide in order to attract and retain their services. So companies like Deliveroo, Monzo, Revolut, Improbable began offering high salaries, flexible hours, no dress code, pool tables, slides in offices, share option schemes. The list goes on. And I've seen some amazing examples of what companies were willing to do to tempt people away from their current employers in this time period. So skills were in short supply, and you didn't have to be in the top 10% of performers to dictate your own terms of employment. We had seats to fill, and if we didn't fill them, the investors would lose confidence. It was an amazing time to work in tech, or to provide services to these companies. So by this time, I really felt like I was experienced enough and wise enough to grow my own team. So I took what I'd earned in the previous years and saved, sourced an expensive office lease in Bournemouth, and I hired a team that quickly grew to 12 people. And it was all very exciting until the pandemic arrived. So the pandemic exposed the critical importance of digital resilience. Companies that had already invested in technology were better positioned to weather the storm. Businesses that had previously been reluctant to embrace new technologies were forced to accelerate their adoption or go out of business. Nearly all of our customers froze hiring efforts in the initial months of the pandemic, So we had to adapt, or we would also go out of business. Now, lots of us were stuck at home playing video games during this period. The games industry was booming, and the stock market speculators had turned their attention to games and other types of immersive technologies. So up until this point, the games industry had actually been sheltered from the intense hiring competition that affected the rest of the tech employment market in the preceding years. This was a passion industry for many years. People were willing to travel far and wide to work on their dream games. The corporations developing these titles set up office spaces in locations outside of core corporate employment hubs, where there was historically less competition for employees. Suddenly, we were all working remotely, and the stock market rewarded the entire sector as they pushed for aggressive growth. For those sitting on large cash reserves, it became about having the biggest team, the most ambitious projects, and growth by any means necessary, which meant acquisitions aplenty, and the need for recruiters experienced at building new teams in these turbulent conditions. So, we've covered this. And then the big tech layoffs started in 2022. So after the pandemic, economic conditions shifted and the big tech layoffs began. Over 295,000 people were laid off during this time period. That's across the UK, the US, and Europe. And the market was flooded with available software engineers, many of whom had been accustomed to compensation levels that could only be afforded by certain economic conditions. Then, in 2023 and 2024, the UK games industry crashed. As the pandemic lifted, investors soon discovered that we were not, in fact, all off immediately to live in the metaverse, and nor were people willing to spend all of their disposable income on games. Shocking, I know. But sometimes it's hard to see when you're in the thick of it and things are going well. 248 UK games companies went out of business, the highest number ever recorded in a single year, and thousands of people lost their jobs. Employers reversed remote working options, bonuses were non-existent, and employer salary paying expectations began returning to pre-pandemic levels. So where does this leave us now? Fortunately for us, we have the emergence of another exciting set of technologies, and we've got a great speaker who's going to hopefully shine a light on this. Banded together as artificial intelligence, and a new boom of sorts is emerging. So what does this mean in the job market now? What type of employment options are there? How can you best position yourself to secure an interview? First, let's break down the three types of employment options in the market. And I'm somewhat oversimplifying things here, but most tech jobs will be for one of the following. So the wave of newly funded startups hiring for the skills required to build AI-driven products or AI-driven companies. Corporations looking for ways to use these technologies to streamline their organizations or innovate with new product development that can help them increase their market share. And non-AI specific tech-driven companies operating in globally challenging financial conditions, offering salaries that reflect these conditions. It's a tough pill to swallow in the short term, but obviously having work is better than not having work. Getting your foot in the door somewhere will give you the opportunities to get back on top, whether it's by over-delivering in your new role or gaining hands-on exposure to the types of systems and tooling experience that these other employers desire. So we're in an employer-driven market now. And what does that mean? Well, we really need to focus more on what employers want rather than sort of what our demands are, at least in the short term anyway, until the AI actually kicks off fully. So in terms of software engineering hiring, I found that employers are looking for domain-driven engineers. Now, that's not domain-driven in the technical sense. I'm using that as a descriptive term. So employers are prioritizing hiring engineers who have a deep understanding of the domain they're operating in. Having domain context is essential for feature prioritization, and expectations are shifting towards engineering departments for this. Product-focused engineers. Employers are prioritizing hiring engineers who understand the commercial objectives of the product they're building and are willing to iterate quickly, experiment with new ideas to assess product market fit and move on quickly from failed experiments. And motivations, and this is a really important one. So employers want to hire highly motivated people at the moment, whose motivations align with the company's goals or the projects they're hiring for. And they'll assess your motivations from initial application, that includes the cover letter, and during the interview process. So be deliberately targeted with your job search and operate under the assumption that it is a human or a potential team member reviewing your entire application, because 9 times out of 10, it is, despite what you read on LinkedIn. So yeah, that's my talk. Sorry, I'm extremely warm up here, you might have noticed, but if anybody has any questions at all about getting hired or like the job market or anything, yeah, I'm happy to answer them. Yeah.
Have any questions?
Sure.
I'm interested in what your experience has been of like in the games industry. There's been this push towards free-to-play games where all of the money comes in from these kind of, I don't know, buying hats for your car or whatever. I'm interested in how that has changed the market and like the financial side of the games industry.
Yeah. What I found when I came into the games industry, I was expecting it to be extremely innovative and really forward-thinking and really cool. What I discovered was lots of corporations who just sort of copy each other and the stock market dictates what they do next, essentially. So Fortnite was a huge hit, and every single game studio that I was working for, which was most of the studios that are in the UK and some globally as well, started working on live service titles. There was this idea that we don't have to do like a 7-year dev cycle and hope it works at the end of it. We can actually just iterate on a product and improve it and find fit that way. And there's much more upside for investors and sort of revenue potential long term. So they all just kind of copied each other, right? So they all thought, we're going to have the next Fortnite, we can do this better. And it was just much more, it was easier to raise money. You're not, the games industry was funded by publishers previously, which is slightly different to typical tech products. So they've got a deep understanding of the creative process and how all of that works. So when the pandemic arrived and lots of money came from external sources, they wanted more predictable revenue streams. So so they really encouraged these kind of live service titles, but it just stifled all the innovation, and everybody working in the industry hated it, and they were sort of miserable as a result. And as soon as the conditions shifted, they canned all the projects, and everybody got let go. So, yeah.
Out of all the companies and the games industry in the past 2 years roughly, which one were you the most surprised that it closed down, or there was layoffs?
None of the ones that closed down surprised me. And I did work for most of them. Actually, no, I'll tell a lie. Sony PlayStation Studios, that surprised me. I hired an amazing team for them in London. Like, it was amazing. It was really good, but I don't know how much I can say here.
Remember we're recording.
Yeah. Yeah, that surprised me. They had an amazing team. They lacked direction. And they could have organized and focused themselves better. So that was one that really surprised me. None of the others surprised me. I guess in recent times, so was it Marvel Rivals that was quite a big hit? So there's a Chinese developer, NetEase, who funded that project. So yeah, they had a really successful game and an amazing team. So I guess that was quite a surprise that they let that team go, but the shifting political climate probably dictated that. So, yeah. Go for it.
So by domain-driven sort of engineers, I guess you mean that companies more interested in, you've got experience in like the financial services industry already, you've got experience in the, construction industry, you've got in...
Not necessarily experience. Obviously experience is great. That's like quite an obvious, plug in my podcast, right? Just a very deliberate application. So you've got an understanding of what the business is. If it's a specific area of financial services, let's take say it's a tech company that's working on invoice automation. You understand. We can all talk to ChatGPT or whatever, and we can get quite a comprehensive understanding of the competitors in that market. The type of tech that's used to deliver these solutions, how that's likely to be replaced by different AI tooling or agents or something in future. So it's really just about when you're applying for jobs, when you're in the interview process, just really go above and beyond on actually understanding why these people are here and building this product. And that might seem quite obvious to a lot of people, but the reason I say that is because I work as a consultant now for a small game studio and for a tech startup, and we have it's unfortunately there's lots of people who are out of work at the moment, so we've got thousands and thousands of job applications, and a lot of people sort of turn up after they apply and they say, this is me, can I have a job, and it's very hard as a recruiter or someone reviewing these things where I think, well, I can look at your CV and I can see you're hardworking, you've had an impressive career, but if I don't think you're deliberately here because you're excited about the problem we're solving and you feel that you can add value to that, and that's not immediately obvious within looking at a cover letter or from something you've said on your application, then I'm unlikely to go ahead with it. And I think that most people would feel that way, sort of business owners and stuff. So, and that's very different to how it's been for the last couple of years. It's been a lot easier to get a job, to be honest with you. Yeah.
I feel like the sort of three things that are on there kind of were basically all saying the same thing, which was just you kind of got to understand commercial motivations and be motivated around that, and also just know what the company does. As simple as that. Yeah,
pretty much, and that might seem really obvious. And then also, I guess the one differentiation to mention on that would be, the difference between like joining an early stage company that's building a new AI product from scratch. They've got, they've got very different expectations. Versus an enterprise company who, they don't know what they're doing with AI. They're terrified of AI. They don't know if they should be spending lots of money on it or spending no money on it. So I think those are kind of two distinct sort of people and skill sets. Sort of more creative entrepreneurial people are probably better suited to the startup, and kind of calm problem solvers are maybe more suited to the enterprise version. But like I said, there will still be companies who aren't doing AI, and they don't need to use AI tech, to continue, and they've got sort of solid businesses that they can, keep running. But, we are in like a globally financially challenging time, like in almost all industry sectors. So salaries have reduced significantly, and that is tough. Like that's tough for everybody, especially if you've been accustomed to, a certain quality of life that was afforded by, the previous boom. But yeah, I think overall, I don't want that to seem overly negative, because actually, things are really picking up now, and I think the dust is sort of settling on all of that stuff, and I'm seeing a lot more. Well, I'm getting a lot more work, to be honest, and there's a lot more new companies popping up. So,
the places still hiring like junior devs, or because there's such a pool of talent that they're picking more senior? And how would you tell a junior dev to pitch themselves versus a senior?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Sorry, what was the first part of the question?
Are people even hiring junior devs, or because there's so many, you can just pick from the more senior? I suppose unless you haven't got the money to pay them. But then again, like you said, wages have gone down. So
yeah, so I think that a lot of companies are pushing to, they want to have people in the office. That's like a big desire. So there are a lot more opportunities for junior devs in office-based roles, and I think that's probably suits you at an early stage of your career. You get to be in the thick of it, and in and around people who are hopefully really experienced, if the companies have got them in the office, and you can kind of accelerate your career that way. But yeah, in the most part, there's not as many opportunities for junior people at the moment, and the expectations are like extremely high. So I'll give you an example. A really cool company that I'm fortunate to be working for at the moment. They're called BlocksD. Check them out. They've got like a version of Minecraft they've built for the web. There's only 5 of them, and they've got 6 million people playing it monthly. So we're open to hiring some junior people there. Even fresh graduates. But the people that are making it through the interview process, they might be just graduated, but actually they've been working all the way through, sometimes full-time jobs during their degrees, for maybe contracting for US tech companies at night. Maybe they've built their own games that they've got thousands of people playing and stuff. So, it's amazed me to see how high the bar has risen on that. Now that might just be a short-term thing, right? But based on supply and demand, the companies have got the opportunity to hire these like amazingly talented people that they might not otherwise have been able to. But I think that if you're a junior, you can't just say, I've graduated, I've got a degree. Even if you've got a first class degree in computer science, it's not, that's not enough to stand out. If you haven't had, ideally you'll have done some internships where you maybe got to touch some production code even. And if you haven't, if it was my children, for example, and they were doing that, I would be recommending to them to do some personal projects, find some people to do some work that you can touch some meaningful code, because it's going to be very, very hard to get employed without that right now. And then, and there's a big push for hiring senior engineers, for very specialist skill sets, and it's not, that might be great. I guess a lot of you might be more experienced and senior, but actually, the expectations are pretty high. In recent years, there was a lot of focus in, even if you're a senior engineer, you'd have quite a lot of people leadership responsibilities and doing mentoring and helping others. All of that stuff has sort of disappeared. It's companies are looking for really high level individual contributors, and the expectations for output is quite high. Now, I'm probably giving a bit of an extreme example. The companies that I hire for and have been hiring for are really actively looking to build these like really intense bits of software and applications. So they've probably got an exceptionally high bar. Yeah.
What would you say is the reflection of these changes in the market geographically? So, for both within the UK, do you see more jobs being concentrated in different parts, and also just globally, what would you say the market should be?
Oh, that's an interesting question. So, specifically, Poland came out of nowhere. So Poland has some absolutely amazing engineers, and for a while, sort of around the pandemic and afterwards, a lot of the large US firms were hiring engineers across Eastern Europe, and they were working remotely for the US firms, and they were paying them huge better salaries than you could get in the UK or in London. A lot of these companies have now set up offices in Eastern Europe, so all of the big tech firms are all there. So that kind of first mover advantage of hiring these remote Europeans has gone, and those kind of jobs used to go to the UK. To be honest, and they're kind of spread out all over Europe. So I think the really big winners from all of that would be Bulgaria, Poland, Hungary, these sorts of regions. So lots of companies are hiring engineers there. There's really they've got and Romania as well. They've got an amazing curriculum that they've had for years in the schools, which is very maths and computer science heavy. So we've not really been doing that in the UK. I'd say that the youngsters in those countries are slightly further ahead of the curve in my experience, and a lot of the companies have learned that. So we've kind of got some catching up to do. So there's been a big push on hiring these people remotely in Europe. Lots of the UK companies are doing that as well, where they've still got remote dev teams. But it's not as I said, it's not as advantageous as it was a couple of years ago, because the salaries have all gone up now, and you could probably have a better quality of life in one of these countries than you might do in the UK at the moment, to be honest. And then geographically, there's still remote work. So people are living and working all over the UK. In the most part, the really great remote jobs are reserved for amazingly talented, hardworking people. So the bar's quite high on that. But lots of them are working for US tech firms. They pay sort of significantly higher salaries, and they they're quite aggressive with their hiring. So kind of identifying these people and stuff.
Right. And within the UK, so globally you mentioned Eastern Europe.
Yeah.
And then remote, and then within the UK, is there a pattern?
I'm only really seeing lots of jobs in London, to be honest. Mainly in London. So it's just not an area that I've got a lot of exposure to at the moment. So I don't want to say no because I'm not like super immersed in that, but I'm not hearing of anything, and not like recent years. So I did a lot of work for companies helping set it up in Bristol. So like Just Eat when they went there a few years ago, and a few others. But I think that these places that are still tech hubs, in the UK, but there's more of a trend for them, housing remote workers, right? Which kind of suits the local areas because they're, high earning people that will sort of spend lots of money and things. So it balances out. But the main bulk of hiring in new startups are in London, and they want people to be in the office in London. And even the people that are funded in London are being asked to move over to Silicon Valley and go over to the US now as well. So, yeah.
The government recently announced this, I can't remember what they call it now, but it's sort of bridging Oxford, Milton Keynes and Cambridge. And making it, I think they call it silicon something. Have you got any thoughts on that? Do you think that's a good idea? Do you think it's going to work?
Where are they going to
moving up there, basically?
where are they going to bridge? Sorry.
I think it was like Oxford, Cambridge, and Milton Keynes. Apparently, there's no direct train yet, but they're on about even making one of those, and they, marketed it as this big thing that's going to rival Silicon Valley and all that sort of stuff. Yeah,
I think that Oxford and Cambridge are the UK's like poster childs, right? So there's a lot of companies and tech businesses that are around there, and the universities themselves obviously have really amazing computer science departments. Yeah, so I can kind of see why the government would push for that, but ultimately the most talented people want to do whatever they want to do, and they'll still be working remotely. So it will be great if they invest in this and they do something to encourage companies to set up there, and that will provide employment opportunities. But I think that in terms of a location, like Cambridge is a great location to live. There's lots of companies there to work for. If you did need to get into London, you can get in there pretty quickly. The train's only about 50 minutes, and it's a nice place as well.
I think they did mention that the house prices are really high up there, so they're on about building loads of new houses and stuff in between to try and bring the markets down.
Yeah, there's some sort of surrounding villages, and if you wanted to go to sort of Peterborough, quite good. Yeah. Yes.
Were there any patterns in the layoffs in the respective crashes? Were senior people the first to go, for example? Was the management layer the first to go? Did juniors go?
Yeah.
Low skilled people go?
Okay, so that's a good question. When they were doing the big scaling up phase, and that's obviously when I was running my company, and we were helping these companies to do that. The focus was almost on the companies wanted to have the biggest teams possible. So in order to facilitate that, they needed to have lots and lots of management layers. So you would have the engineering track, so say up to principal engineer, and then you'd have an engineering manager who would look after one team, or maybe two teams, a senior engineering manager who would look after multiple engineering managers, and then a director of engineering who would look after multiple senior engineering managers, and maybe a VP above them and a CTO above them. So within that sort of structure, you had lots of people who were in senior management roles and leading teams because they had amazing people skills. They weren't necessarily technically amazing, but they were really great with people. They understood how to build diverse teams. They understood how to treat people well. They were, I don't know what the best word to use is, but they really held things together. And those companies wouldn't have been able to hire all of those people if they didn't have this layer in between. It's a very different skill set. That's been wiped out completely. The employers were focused entirely on hands-on skills, really. If you were a leader, it was leading by example. Moving away from that sort of softer leadership approach. And some people were unfairly branded as a result of that. I don't think that Elon Musk's work in the US has helped anyone, but there was a narrative around companies trying to avoid these overly bureaucratic type managers, and there was a perception that some people had this success in their careers because of working that sort of bureaucracy, which I don't think is fair, because I saw firsthand how helpful those people were. But yeah, that was the only real pattern. It was, no management for the sake of management. You need to be, a technical expert or, doing something meaningful. I've only got 5 minutes, but I'll give you one more.
So just as you were speaking, my passion was drawing towards the product focused mindset, because I've also heard a lot about product owners kind of being let go of, and it sounds like it's the first time I'm really hearing this idea of, as a software engineer, you also need to have this product focus, which sounds like what product owners would have been there for.
So again, that kind of ties in with what I was saying. So the product role now, from what I've seen anyway, is more the people who are doing the roles seem to be more and more technical. And even some of that responsibility is kind of going over to the engineering teams. Whereas previously you might have had a product person who was like really good at understanding the devs and what was going on and gluing everyone together. Again, a role that I think is really valuable. But that's one of those types of roles. It's not that the product role's disappearing, it's that the way of doing it is not as sought after. So sometimes you'll have, the company will want to hire like very product focused engineers, so they are more interested in that side, or they'll have a product manager who was a former engineer or is quite technical as well. I better go. Just quickly, sorry. I've got a podcast. It's called the Studio Vision Podcast. I just do long form interviews with people from the games industry and tech, so mainly founders and some CEOs and stuff. And I do every 3 months a hiring market update. And that's just based on my experience and what I've seen. But Studio Vision Podcast, but you can find it on anywhere really, or studiovisionpodcast.com as well. Cool.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Andy.
Yeah, thanks, Mark.
We're going to take a break now for about
20-25 minutes.
Let's be back here about 10 past. We will move on to our second talk. Next up, Claudia.
Well, thank you, guys. Well, first of all, thank you for hosting me and letting me talk over here. I really appreciate it. I love sharing knowledge. So I hope that you like it and that you like the topic as well. As you know, we're going to be talking about how Agentic AI, this new trend, this new topic that is coming up in 2025, that is meant to be what is it actually? What are we talking about? Everyone is talking about it and so hype, but what actually means. I've recently been attending a couple of events, not even speaking, and everyone was talking about it. The main two words that were mostly repeated were AI and agents, which is quite surprising because it's very early stages of the year. Back in 2024, which was a couple of months ago, the most repeated word was generative AI, but now everyone seems to have switched off and turned directly to agents. So yeah, exactly. What is it? If you Google it as well, or if you go on social media, there will be loads of different news. As you can see over here, I catch up a little bit of the main ones or important ones that have been talking on agents and how revolutionary this is going to be, how they market it, all of those. But there's a quite interesting quote about Andrew Ng, which is one of the founders of Deep Learning AI, for those who don't know him. He's been researching about neural networks and working with them for such a long time, his whole career, essentially. And he's saying AI agents and workflows are the next frontier in generative AI, which is essentially just saying is the next step within the technology of AI in the journey, because we are not reaching an end goal and just saying, oh, we have reached the limit. We are just following that journey. And this is essentially just one more step. So what we're going to cover, first of all, what are AI agents? Because a lot of people are talking about it, but they might not know essentially what are they bringing up to the table, which are the new capabilities, which are the difference with traditional systems, for example, like those systems that we have been coding in software solutions our whole life, no? Where can they be applied, obviously, because not all AI solutions are fit for all of the different purposes, and that's a fact. Which are the tools? What are tools, actually? Because this is like very specific to AI agents. And which is the AI agent workflow? Okay. So to kick it off, I want to do it with an example. So you can imagine the new capabilities of these agents. So imagine you have this butler, small robot, Sebastian, and you ask Sebastian, oh, please come up with a healthy dinner recipe with whatever there is inside the fridge. I just don't know what is available, take into account everything, but just come up with something healthy. I can't be bothered to think. So what will the agent do? The agent will go to the kitchen, first of all, obviously, otherwise it cannot perform anything. I will have a look at the toolbox and see, okay, which tools do I have available to use? What can I have as a reference? Is there something useful I can use? For example, I don't know, obviously the fridge. I need to have a look inside of the fridge to see what food is available, what is rotten and I cannot use. Recipe books, health stats from the wearables. What workouts has Claudia performed today? Do I need to take into account some recovery or not for her performance? Or just some health insights? And yeah, what else? Oh, actually, I can access my memory as well, because I remember that I had a talk with Claudia like a week or two ago, where she told me that she wants to, her objective is to lose weight. So I should take that into account as well, right, for that recipe. So having all this into account, it will come up with a plan and say, okay, I need to look up the fridge, I need to check all the insights, I need to check out the daily workouts, access the memory, and find a recipe with all those constraints, all that information. What we'll do, once it has come up with all this plan, it will execute all those actions. It will access the tools, it will execute them, and once it has come up with one solution, with the first recipe, it will reason and it will think, actually, does this recipe account for the objectives that Claudia has told me? Is this actually achieving the goal that we have set up or not? If it doesn't, we should give this feedback and go again and re-execute everything, changing some minors from the feedback that we are receiving. Okay? So once it has run as many times as he has thought that is needed and come up with a good solution, it will come back. Well, yeah, it's taking action. Sorry for that. It will come back and I'll give you the healthy dinner recipe. Because obviously right now they cannot take and go and cook for you as well as a private chef as well, if only. But at least it's giving you the recipe, right? So yeah, this is one of the examples, as you can see, of the capabilities, the new capabilities that an agent can come up with. And which are the differences with all the different systems and different solutions that we had available before. When we come up with traditional systems, I'll move around just because a lot of people are in the middle so you can see the screens. When we come with traditional systems, you have always had to define which are all the different scenarios. It's a predefined rule base. So if this, then go here, and then if not, go there. And if this scenario happens, just do this. So it's always like reactive rather than predictive. And you need to come up with as many scenarios possible. QA will test it and will say, oh, have you thought about that? Oh, actually, no, then go and do it, right? So that's kind of like the definition of the traditional system. So if we make another example, we will say, okay, we can implement a software solution that will send a notification every time a flight booking prices to go to Seville, which is my hometown, drop below £50. So every time they drop down £50, I'll get a notification and I'll be, oh, now is the moment to buy it. When we come to generative AI, which is totally different, it's not an enhancement of the traditional systems, it's just different capabilities, different use cases. An LLM, if we start with the basic LLM, it's been trained under certain information, and that's the only knowledge that it has. So it's as if you would go to university and then you will never ever learn anything else. So the only knowledge that you have is the university knowledge, and that's it. Those are your resources, right? However, we have included more information now to the LLMs and generative AI solutions, for example, with the RAG, which essentially is just accessing those outsourced information points, such as even like the web search, internet, you get up-to-date data, right? Or even domain knowledge, so you can enhance those domains information about your industry. So it will be capable of doing more things, but it still has its own limitations. So an example of what generative AI, ChatGPT, for example, have been capable of in terms of like traveling, for example, it will come up with a plan of 5 days trip plan to Seville. And it will give you like this very detailed, you can go to La Giralda, then you can go to Los Alcázares, blah, 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 blah. And then you can go to this restaurant and this other restaurant, and this is the route that you can take, and it will take you 2 hours. But all this is not planning and reasoning. It's just going, searching on the internet, finding people, finding blogs that have been talking about that topic, and just summarizing the information and giving it to you. So it's essentially that way of searching in an enhanced way that you reach the point directly, right? You don't have to go through all the different blog posts and compare what they have all been saying, how many things can you see in 1 day or 2 days, in that city. So then when we come to the AI agent, as we were defining before in the previous example, the LLM will become your brain. So it's the brain that will think about everything that needs to plan, is that generic knowledge of simply just talking as we are talking right now, of reasoning, and all those capabilities, but not anything like domain knowledge referral. But it will understand that it needs to access the memory, or that it needs to use some tools, or that it needs to get data from the environment and get some insights from the environment. So if, for example, we go to the travel example, we can ask, oh, can you plan a budget-friendly trip with my remaining annual leave to an exotic destination during the UK school holidays? And it will, if only it has access, obviously, it will access the company database to know how many days you have left, remaining annual leave. It will access the internet to get to know when are the UK school holidays. So it will cater all those. And then it will start finding those exotic, warm, relaxing places and try to find a budget-friendly timing for you to go and spend that time, right? And that's the moment where, obviously, it's not going to get it right on the first time. It's never going to get it right. Because if you ask this kind of question, even simpler, for example, even the 5 days trip plan to Seville, when you ask it to right now to ChatGPT, it will come up with a solution. But if you ask again, it will come up with a totally different solution, right? So this is what happens actually here as well. It will just access all the information. Yeah, it will take into account all the constraints of data that you have said. But then it will come up with a solution, but it will reason, okay, is this actually meeting the requirements and the user intent of the query that has been set? If not, let's give the feedback. What is missing, or what do we need to change? And let's run again until it gets to the end goal, essentially. So that's what the AI agent capabilities is bringing to the table. It's just enhancing those generative AI capabilities and going on top of the orchestration. Where can we use AI agents? AI in general, talking about AI, every single solution has its different purposes and different use cases. We shouldn't be just shooting in and saying, oh yeah, our company needs to do AI. Let's just try and fit it in and find anything. I don't care, but just use AI. That's kind of like the feeling at the moment, right? And then everyone goes to this kind of events, like big events, and to find which are the new trends. And they will say, yeah, we're highly investing in AI, but we still don't know which is the business case. We're trying to figure out which is the business case. So yeah, let's not try to shoe it in. Let's try to identify actually what each of the different fields and different solutions are bringing up to the table, because maybe generative AI is more than enough for the business case that you need and for your industry. Or maybe AI agents is bringing that enhancement and it's much better for you. For example, well, I won't give the example right now. I'll give it later. But essentially, agents, they are doing really, really good when we are talking about open-ended problems. So we were talking about these predefined rules, right? So when those predefined rules get very complex, it doesn't make sense to just go and code everything. Just let the agent do it and resolve it, and it will come up with a solution. All these multi-step processes as well, it all comes alongside. Something that is very beneficial as well is the improvement over time, because as you have seen, there's this reasoning and observability at the end, where it gives feedback to the model. So it will learn from those experiences, those previous experiences, and it will store them all in the memory, and then it can access the memory. So it's like if only it was a person like us. It's a bit hard to say this, but as if it was a person and you were learning and just learning by experience the same way. And then on the next time when you're doing a similar task, you know how to use those new tools because you have been exposed to that before. So it's a similar concept, essentially. Then we have correctness first environments as well, which essentially is a really big step forward in terms of hallucinations. Have you ever heard about generative AI models hallucinating? Yes, all nodding. Amazing. Yeah, this has been one of the main challenges in generative AI. And it's the problem of, because they were trained on certain knowledge, if they didn't know the answer, they will just come up with an answer. Because it's like, oh, I'm like a god, I know about everything. I need to come up with a solution and with a response to the query. I cannot say, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know, it's not in my vocabulary. Let's say it that way. But what happened with AI agents? Because they have this feedback loop and they have this reasoning about, is it actually correct? self-reflectioning, right? It will have this loop that until it actually gets to the right solution, it won't give you the solution. So it's really good because it's building a lot of trust, it's reducing a lot of hallucinations. So it's a really step forward in that kind of challenge that we had on generative AI. And obviously as well, dealing with complex database interactions, SQL queries, we have all felt that pain. Whenever you need to make a complex one, it can be difficult to get to the top notch just by like the first time. There's always iterations. Now you can just do it in a natural language way, and it will iterate itself. If the first time it doesn't come up with the good solution, like probably we wouldn't have done it either, it will just iterate itself until changing that SQL query until it gets the user intent, which is really, really cool. I'll briefly talk about that example, just as an example of how can you use the AI agents. WTW, will start with Watson, which is the company I work for, is in the insurance sector. So for us, underwriting is such a complex solution. There's loads of different things involved. And in such, for example, you could reduce all that hazard given a tool like an agent in terms of collecting data, evaluating risk, detecting fraud, evaluating pricing with different models, making decisions or at least suggesting decisions, and compliance as well in terms of are we complying with all the regulations and everything. This is really, really good. So for example, now it's coming up with a sample. Decision making. This is quite hard. Are you going to allow the agent to take decisions or not? Or do you rather get suggestions from the agent? So this is kind of one of the examples where you might think, okay, maybe generative AI is enough for me, at least for now, because I'm not going to let the agent make the decisions. Or I'll let the agent make suggestions, Cool. So what are tools? Coming up a bit more in depth about the agents. We have been talking about this toolbox, right, that has all these capabilities that the agents could use. Essentially, tools have been already there for generative AI. Not that much explored, to be honest. They are being more explored now with the agentic. They are kind of like fusion. But essentially, you have web search, for example, to fetch up-to-date data from the internet. You've got the RAG, which is just retrieving customized information from your internal or external databases. You can connect it through APIs as well. So anything that contains an API, you can just plug it in and we'll extract information from there, environmental data, and all these kind of things. You can have a calculator. So I don't know if you were aware, but how generative AI models, like large language models, were making a mathematical operation, like, I don't know, 2 + 2. They were creating Python code to execute the operation. They will execute the code and give you the answer. So it was highly compute, massive. Now you can just have a tool that is actually a calculator, and it will use the tool, and it will reduce that much compute, which is really good for sustainability as well. And for your budgets as well. Then you can have predefined code as well. So if only you want still to use like predefined rules, or you want some new capabilities that you're bringing onto the table, you can define code and it will execute it if you define well what is actually the intention of that tool to use. And as well, you can use other LLMs models, for example, the translation models or text-to-speech, image generation models, or different machine learning models. When we're talking about the insurance case, the fraud detection is a model, predictive modeling is another model, computer vision. So there's loads of opportunities there that you can use as tools for the AI agents and make them experts in different fields, essentially. So when it comes to the workflow, we have gone through it quite well. So it's called the thought, action, observation cycle. Also, this side of the workflow is called the react, because it's rethinking, replanning, and acting, essentially. Some of the different thoughts that you could have, planning, analysis, we have gone through most of them over the different examples. Something important, obviously prioritization, the memory integration, self-reflecting, as we have said. Oh, actually, am I meeting this? Is one unit test failing? Then something is wrong. I should redo it again, the code. All these kind of things, all these kind of thoughts. And when we come to the type of actions, here is when we are actually interacting with the environment, obviously, when we are using the tools, executing them. And there could be many different ways of doing it. So we can use the tool, or we can interact with the environment, or we can gather information just from those databases and general knowledge that needs to be extracted, or you can communicate. And you will say, how are you going to communicate? Yes, they can ask you questions, so you can give them feedback, because maybe in the query that you have provided, there's missing information for them to act. So it's like, I mean, the context, it was very poor. The prompt was very poor. I need more information. So they'll tell you, oh, please, can you provide this? Or would you rather do this action or this other action? And they will give you some hints for you to decide, no? But as well, as you will see later, they can communicate between each other, because we have been focusing a lot in only one agent. But what will happen if you start having group chats of agents and they communicate between each other? So that's the way they communicate. And then in terms of observation, when all those actions have been done, and we need to have a look at which are those results and take action, have a look at observe all those. It will look at all the environmental data, changes in data, time-based events. So imagine a new, I don't know, you were planning that trip and you wanted, I love tennis, okay, I'll say an example in tennis. I want to go to a tournament, and that's the kind of trip that I want to plan. And suddenly the tickets get sold out, and we need to change the trip to somewhere else because I just want to go to one tournament. So then it will need to react to it, and it will need to adapt to it. Or just new emerging data, new changes in trends, for example, and you need to react to those changes in the trend. Yeah, so that's the thing, more or less. And what we were just mentioning about communication, there's something very interesting that they have researched, and I'll make an analogy first. So imagine, we are all developers, right? And you would say, okay, Claudia, if a developer can make everything, it has all the resources to just make all the work, why would you have a team of developers? The same goes with the agents. If an agent is capable of performing all those different actions, why would you have a team of agents or a group of agents communicating between each other, debating between each other until they get that work done? Because you are able to set the goal. How do you say it? Just simplify all the work and structure it in subtasks, right? And you can parallelize works as well. And some might be experts on backend, some might be experts on frontend, some others on AI, or different cloud environments, DevOps, product managers, CEOs, so many roles. You call it. But essentially, the researchers have said that whenever you are using the multi-agent collaboration approach, the results are much better. So if only you are into looking at agents and all that, the recommendation right now is for you to define different specific roles, and they need to be experts on certain domain, quite clear. Everything needs to be very clear. If you're defining a tool, it needs to be very clear. But they will talk between each other. They will have those debates, and they will come up with the best solution. That's the main thing. And yeah, that's all I wanted to say. I hope you enjoy it. There's really good resources out there that are coming up right now from really good, well-known companies like Microsoft, Hugging Face. I'm making this one actually. And they are really, really good. Some of the main frameworks that are, and orchestrators that are coming up for AI agents, it's LangChain, which is the main first one that came up. And now you have on top Crew AI, which is coming up quite fast. And this one over here is called AutoGen, which is a Microsoft research project, which right now is on preview mode, but it has a lot of potential as well. So yeah, have a look if only you want to keep learning about it and you're interested. It's quite easy, to be honest, to create an AI agent and just play with them. So I encourage you to do it and have a look. And that's it. Hope you like it. Go ahead.
You did a little bit of a kind of doom and gloom view of like, well, if all the agents could do our jobs, then why do we do it? But genuinely, what's your view on the future?
My view.
Maybe short or long term, your preference on where it's going to go next. Are they going to take our jobs, or is it going to be a happy utopia?
No, let's be honest. This is always going to be a tool. It's never going to replace someone's job. We have seen, like before AI agents, for example, which they can be reflected, as we have done in this example, in developers, and we have seen that they perform well in code generation, which actually, as a note, you might have worked with Copilot or code generation tools, and you might have seen that they were always generating code with bugs and not review code or over unit test and all this. With this agentic mode, it's going to revolutionize that. It's going to enhance much more the quality of the code that is actually generating by your prompts. But that's the thing. It's going to be a tool for us. I don't see overtaking, obviously, your jobs. That's impossible. The knowledge that we have here is irreplaceable. And yeah, on previous industries and type of roles, I don't know, for example, which industry has been more affected by it? I don't think there's been any in particular, you know?
Maybe call center? There seems to be a lot of focus.
Call center, yeah, the first line support, no?
Yeah.
But still, yeah, you're given like that support. It will take out a lot of your hard work of receiving multiple calls or being behind the chat, no?
Repetitive stuff.
But yeah, exactly. That's what it's gonna take away from us. All that repetitive stuff, all that work that we didn't like about, even like scheduling meeting and finding the right spot for everyone to be available, that kind of things. So it's just getting away from that and just allowing us to focus on actually innovating, learning new things, and coding more.
Exciting. Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So,
any of it?
Do you have a favorite or an opinion on those agent frameworks?
Opinion. To be honest, no, not that one. Not that opinion. I've been exploring all of them. LangChain at the end is kind of like the first one that came up because, yeah, no, LangChain is code solution essentially, and because it was the first one, most of the others are based on LangChain actually. So if you want to learn about the foundations of the agentic mode, go and use LangChain. That was the first. Now, AutoGen, I would say, is quite straightforward and is very well defined on the different roles and everything and how it works. I quite enjoyed it a lot. And Crew AI, which I started looking at it, they had a no-code UI that you can just drag and drop and do your agents, create your own agents. I'm more a code person. So, yeah, let's see, let's explore. It's not a no. I know that there's, at the end, it's not in preview mode either. It's something that is released, that you can use, license. So, yeah. But the first one, my first go-to be honest, my preference was the Microsoft one, because in my company, we work with Azure. So at the end, we had like more tendency towards Microsoft. But that's the only reason. Yep. There were over there first?
Time for one more quick one.
Okay.
I thought it was interesting you were talking about the correctness first and the kind of the ability of the agent to not only come up with a solution, but verify that solution. So what's your view on how we, as developers, how we go about allowing the tool to verify if something is correct or not? And so I suppose it kind of, our obligation turns from building a solution to encoding, like how do you tell if this is correct, or how do you assess the results?
So itself is gonna assess and self-reflect by the prompt that you have gave. So the better you define the prompt, the better it will be able to assess if it's correct, whatever it has generated. So if you give a very well-defined requirement, like the user stories, right? Sometimes they're missing requirements or acceptance criteria, no? If you gave them very well defined, then it would be easier for them to assess. But let's say it, even if we have this correctness first, yes, it's right. It's not gonna hallucinate that much. It's gonna build our trust on these solutions. But at the same time, it's like before we were just double checking all the time if the solution was actually doing what we were our intent, right? Now we will need to expend less time to ensure that that is actually working, essentially, and will be easier to refine.
Just to expand on that point, one thing we're doing is you give your coding problem to one LLM, and then you say to another LLM, hey, take this buggy bit of code and fix all the bugs. And if you keep on bouncing it between a few, you get...
Yeah, actually, with the multi-agent, some of the researchers have said that they are getting a lot of value when one of the agent is, for example, based on GPT, and the other one is based on cloud or in DeepSeek. So they have like this different perspective, totally different, because their general knowledge is totally different. Off you go.
Thank you very much, Claudia.
Oh, you're welcome.
So I just wanted to say thank you again to our speakers. Claudia's the only one here, and he's had to go home. So thank you very much, and thank you for coming all the way from London. That's that's a big thing from Bournemouth. We don't like London here. It's a big scary place.
Well, I'm from Spain. Don't worry, guys. Just passing by.
Yeah. Thank you also to the volunteers who's helped tonight. The two at the back, my beautiful wife Kerry and Jazz, who decided to turn up and help us all out. Thank you very much. There's also Nigel on the desk, who's part of Barclays Eagle Labs, and has organised to allow us to have the room and the kitchen tonight. They work here in conjunction with the Foundry. So Nigel, who's sat on the desk waiting for us all to go so he can go home, because he's been here since about 6 a.m. apparently, with a different meetup this morning for breakfast. Who else have I forgot? Reconnect. So we'll come back to those in a sec. They support dev.talk, Just Pick One UK. It's a really good YouTube channel in case anybody hasn't heard about it yet. Just Pick One UK. No? Okay. at Foundry and Barclays Eagle Labs, because without all of them, we wouldn't be here tonight, and we wouldn't be able to do this for free. And of course, I have to mention Reconnect because it's cool. It's a conference that's happening on July 4th here in Poole, Poole and Bournemouth College, in a big theatre there. They've got workshops happening as well. They're badgering me to do a workshop. Adam in the back, wave Adam, is going to be one of the speakers there. Unfortunately, I didn't make the cut for a speaker, but they do have Kevlin Henney, which I really hope somebody knows who he is because he's awesome. He's a fantastic speaker. So he's doing the keynote there. The call for speakers closed a few days ago, so they are now advertising the speaker lineup, and it's looking really good already. So do get your tickets. They're about 60 quid. They're about to go up in price, especially now the speaker lineup has been announced. But of course, because you came, type that into the checkout and you can get a reduction. I think it's about 10% off. Tickets are selling really fast, so there's 200 in total. So it's a small conference. Getting there quick before they all disappear. The lineup's going to be really good. Full day conference, July 4th, Friday, July 4th, just down the road. So thank you all for coming, because it's all you that make this happen. Well, it's me that makes this happen. It's all you that join to actually make all the time that I spent at home swearing at why LinkedIn won't show my adverts and all the other things. It makes it worth it. Building this community. You know, I am part of this community. I am a software engineer. I don't know whether I've ever said that. I'm a software engineer. This community is for me because I want it. I want to come to these tech events. So it's really good to see you all come.